My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Lost Season 6, and this will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch my review because I will be going in depth. I heard some really mixed to bad things about this final season, and I have to say that it did not end as strongly as I would have liked it to. But let's begin talking about the characters. And usually when I talk about the characters, I talk about Jack, Kate, and Sawyer first. But today, we're going to do things a little differently. That's right, we're going to mix things up a bit. We're going to go ahead and talk about the two key characters of this season, and that is Jacob and the Man in Black. No, I don't mean Will Smith or Tommy Lee Jones. I mean whatever this thing was. But beginning with Jacob. Jacob was a very boring character who added nothing, and if people didn't mention him all the time, he would have been completely forgotten. While the Man in Black, aka the Smoke Monster, which was definitely not planned out at all, was just a terribly written character. Like, what even was his goal? Destroy the island by destroying the light? That wasn't set up at the start of this season at all. In order to understand a villain, you've got to have some sense of what his motivation and what he's trying to accomplish, and that just isn't clear throughout. And I just found these two to be incredibly bland characters, and their origin story was really dumb to me. I believe the episode was called Across the Sea, and I just thought it was really dumb and goofy in a very negative way. It just leaves me wondering, why not make these two characters actual gods? Like, that would make much more sense to me, and like, the metaphors were very clear that Jacob is clearly meant to be Jesus and Man in Black is clearly meant to be the devil. And it's a very ambitious idea, and there's moments where it works, mainly in the episode Dr. Linus, but for the most part, it does not. If you want to do something as big and as ambitious as that, then you have to go all out. Instead of just making it the metaphors, make these characters actual gods and what they represent clear, and just go all out in that direction, because it just feels like a half-assed attempt while introducing the idea slightly but not going all the way. And the more the season plays out, it just became clear that they clearly wanted Locke to be the villain. Like, when Jack and the Man in Black are fighting in the very last episode, they clearly were building up to that for the entire show. But by this point, they're just like, shit guys, we killed off Locke, how can we do this? And they're like, hear me out. What if the devil looked like Locke? And they're like, brilliant, I love it. And it's just like, if you wanted Locke to be the villain, then just make Locke the villain. Whenever we see him, we don't see the Man in Black, we just see Locke. Everyone even calls him Locke. They don't call him the devil. Like, that would be more effective if they're just like, what does the devil want? Yeah, that would be effective. But instead they call him Locke. You know, like, if he shape-shifted more, or looked deformed, or looked like a monster, that'd be a much more effective way to go about this character, but they just don't go there. There's one line that's a flashback to an earlier episode where actual Locke is just like, wow, who are these two people? Adam and Eve? I feel like that's what they were going for with these characters, but if anything else, isn't it more Cain and Abel? But yeah. Speaking of Locke, I don't have a lot to say on his characters this season, and I just have to say, looking back on season 5, they did him dirty. Like, they killed off this essential character to the show, and we didn't even get the chance to mourn him because we thought he was still alive. By the time it settles in that he's actually dead, that's like 20 episodes ago. Any impact is gone. But let's talk about the main three characters, Jack, Sawyer, and Kate. And I have to say, I do not like the treatment of these three characters in this season. There was so much going on to the point where those three were kind of just left in the background. They felt like secondary characters. And it's the final season. Those are the characters we care most about. And it feels kind of disrespectful to push them back as much as they did. Let's talk about Jack. There's some alternate timeline stuff going on, so let's quickly talk about that. Because I kind of like some of the ideas they're trying to explore there. Because in that alternate timelines, we get to see that Jack and Locke in a different life could have gotten along just fine and been friends. And I like that idea. And I didn't like the fact that they gave him a son. His son was very annoying. I would like one of the screenwriters to give me 13 reasons why they thought that was a good idea. If you get it, you get it. There's also one moment in the alternate timeline where Jack finds out that he's related to Claire and he's with his son and they're about to get their father's will read to them, and then he's just like, oh, I have to go. And that's a bigger issue that I'm going to talk on a bit later, but I thought that was really stupid. They brought them all together just to reschedule it for later. The Jack stuff on the island, I like some of the ideas they're going for with them making him into Locke and him having to humble himself this past season. Well, he won't be the leader, but he's got to be willing to take directions from other people. I like that idea a lot. But the execution of this character, I hated. I thought Jack was so damn annoying this season. Him wanting to be on this island, to stay here, was just so incredibly forced and stupid. And like when he jumps off the boat, I don't even blame Sawyer. Like I would be just as mad. He also really acted stupid in moments. Like, okay, so Jack and Claire are half brother, half sister, and I just feel like they've done nothing with that. And there was a clear moment where they could have done something. Because Jack is asked by Sawyer to bring Holly and Sahid and someone else over to the boat. And Jack's talking to Claire and he leaves her behind. And then Kate gets mad that Sawyer wants to leave without Kate. And it could have been a great moment for Jack where he disobeys Sawyer. He brings his sister, which would make perfect sense because she is his sister. And then Kate would have been impressed that no, Jack still has some humanity left. And that would have reminded her of the love that she had for him. Could have been a really great moment, but they didn't go in that direction. Then near the end of the season, like Jacob does some kind of weird ritual thing where he turns Jack into just like him, and I thought this stuff was really stupid. But I think the worst part of Jack's character is that he just gives up. He just wants to die. And I just hated that. Like there's even a moment where Kate's just like, Jack, nothing is irreversible. Hinting to him that they can still make things work. And he wants to die. You know, if he sacrificed himself for Kate or someone, that would at least make sense in the moment. But he literally wants to sacrifice himself for the island. That's right. Like, by this point, everyone's either getting off or everyone else is dead. So you're not saving anyone. Just, oh. And the island gave me a purpose. And it just did not work for me in any way whatsoever. And then we've got Kate, who in the alternate timeline is getting chased by security through the airport. And she's waiting for a taxi. And instead of just like leaving the airport and running away, she's just waiting for a taxi still. It's just that false sense of tension they want to give you. With her on the island, I still have zero emotional attachment to her wanting to find Claire, especially because she hasn't brought Claire up for like the past 10 episodes. So I'm supposed to be invested in this. I'm just not. And then when she finally does find Claire, she just words everything the worst possible way to her. Like, oh, I took Aaron. I'm his mom now. Why would you say it like that? Like, can't you think of another way? I do like some of the banter that she has with Sawyer still. Like, there's one part where Sawyer's like, I'm gonna go to this, and no, you're not coming with me. And she's like, oh, well, I guess I'd have to resist the urge to come. It was said very sarcastically, and I thought that was funny. And then we've got Sawyer, who's been my favorite character throughout this entire show, and I think they did him dirty this last season. Now, there is some great lines, like one point he's just like to Holly, calm down, Bigfoot, or when Jack's doing the ritual, he's just like to Kate, you thought he had a god complex before. Maybe the best line in the entire show. But some of the other stuff they went about his character, like there's one scene where he remembers Jacob, who gave him a pen 20 years ago, And I'm just like, you really expect me to buy that he remembers that? Okay, that's I don't. I didn't like the fact that he got really upset over Julia dying and hated Jack for like 2 hours and then he seemed good again. Like, each episode takes place right after the next, so like it took him just a very short period of time to get over it. And it would have been great if we just kind of saw how broken up he was throughout this season, and for him to try to find purpose to keep going. I think that could have been a really meaningful arc, but they just seemed like they didn't know what to do with him. Like, some of the ways that he acted this season didn't work for me. He felt like a different character. Like, he keeps saying, I have a plan. But he's just hanging out, doing nothing, hanging out in the background, and I didn't like that. And once again, there's a moment where him and Jack should have talked. Just talked about what's happened, about how angry Sawyer is at him for letting Julia die, and they just never get that moment. Anytime you think they're going to talk about anything, they don't. I like the idea that the Sawyer is becoming like Jack was in the first season, so you get that Jack and Locke rivalry with Jack and Sawyer now, and that would be a great way to show growth, but they didn't nail it. Because they're just too left off in the background with too little to do. And then we've got Juliet, and I've already said it in my last review, but her surviving that fall is just stupid and contrived just for her to die 2 seconds after Sawyer finds her. I don't buy it. The love rectangle did have me a bit worried for a little bit because Sawyer and Kate do spend a lot of time together, and I was just hoping they wouldn't. Otherwise, you have the How I Met Your Mother effect where, oh, this character found someone he loves just for her to die off, for him to go back to the first girl. Like, I would have hated that. So I'm glad they didn't go that route. I like that everyone ended up with who they should have, but I'm still not satisfied. Like, I wanted more scenes with Jack and Kate about them, them flirting and them talking about what they've gone through. But they avoid it at every possible chance. They finally sit down to talk to each other, and then someone will just be like, hey Jack, can you help me move this tree, or something dumb like that. It's just like, no, let the characters talk. I do love how in the latter bit of the season, though, you still see that they genuinely care for each other. Like, when Jack joins the group, Kate smiles at him, and when they get off the submarine, Kate's like so worried but thankful that Jack's alive. And their last moments on the island, like, I'm not gonna lie, I got a little bit teary-eyed. Well, she gives him one last kiss and she's like, I love you. Jack's waited all this time to hear those words. And it was just a very powerful moment that I wish was built up to better for the rest of the season. I do like the fact that, like, in the first couple seasons, what draws Jack and Kate together was their acts of heroism, how they always want to help other people, and it's that very idea that also separated them at the very end. I just wish they explored it more. Then we've got Ben, and Ben, okay, in the alternate timeline, I'm not gonna lie, the whole plot of Ben trying to get the principal's job truly cracked me up. I think it's whatever. I like what they were going for with him on the island. In fact, this might be the most I've liked his character since season 3 because they try to redeem him. They try to give him a tale about forgiveness and redemption, and there's moments where it works. I don't really buy the fact that he would feel bad about killing Locke when he killed him in such cold blood, and once again, he let his daughter die like that, and I'm not attached to him regarding those two deaths because he just let it happen. But the whole idea of this character trying to earn forgiveness, I like those elements of this season. And then we've got Richard, who has 2 great scenes this season that really do utilize the ideas this season's going for. One is a scene between him and Jack where he asks Jack to kill him, and I thought this was a really great scene. And it was also where the metaphor became very apparent to me. And then there's one scene where he talks to Jacob in a flashback episode, and I thought that was a great scene. There was one line that Jack says to Richard at a point where, at least he's not stalling, and I just hold it as, at least he's not Stalin. And I'm like, that is true, at least he's not Stalin, but that's just my sense of humor. Sorry that I told you guys. I do like the fact that they finally tried to give him depth, that they tell you how he came to be the way he is, but it's just far too late for that. It's just, you should have established this character early on, and even after all the amount of depth they give him this season, he still amounts to nothing. He really has no effect on the plot, he does nothing, he just ends up being completely irrelevant. Then you've got Desmond, and out of all the characters, this is the treatment of any character that I hate the most, because him and Penny's story was so good. To separate them again, to bring him back to the island again, it wasn't needed. I think this is a character that should have been left alone for this final season. Him being brought to the island by Charles Whitmore was very forced and contrived. Him being some sort of electromagnetic proof man was just ridiculous. And then they put him in a well at one point, and I didn't buy the fact that he couldn't escape. And yeah, there's nothing about this character worked for me this season. There was one scene though in the alternate timeline where he runs over Locke, and it truly cracked me up. Maybe I'm just a terrible person. And then we've got Claire, that as soon as we saw her in the state that she's in, I'm just like, oh, so she's the exact same as a French lady now. And I feel like they could have explored that a bit, but they really don't. I feel like they regret bringing her back at a certain point, because then she just gets left in the background and does nothing. Her only purpose is to serve as motivation for Kate, and just everyone constantly forgets about her, and I can't really blame them. Her relationship with Jack, like I said, is irrelevant, and this is a character that's never worked for me, and even when they try to do something different to make her more interesting in this final season, it still doesn't work. Then you've got Miles, and Miles talking to the dead is still stupid, but I think the actor has really come to his own in this show, and I do like his presence. So even though I didn't love him at the start, and there's some stupid writing around this character, the actor does elevate this character and makes him a charismatic presence that I enjoy. And speaking of speaking to the dead, Holy can do that now too, which I just found to be ridiculous. I'm like, okay, one guy speaking to the dead is way too far-fetched, but two people, give me a break. It's too much. I didn't like him this season. I don't really enjoy this character. There's moments where you can tell that like he's supposed to be the most human of the bunch, and I just never really feel that. You've got Saeed, who I really enjoyed in the first season, but since then they've given him really nothing to do. He's a very one-note character. He doesn't grow, and in the very end, I just found it was odd that he reunites with Shannon, this girl who he dated for a week, over the wife that he was married to, who died after 6 months. Like, why did he pick Shannon in heaven over his wife? Just very weird. Didn't work for me. And then you've got Jin and Sun. And there's some stuff with these characters that I really didn't like. Mainly the alternate timeline stuff. I didn't like that. Like, Jin gets captured at a point and they leave a box cutter right next to him. And then on the island, Sun loses her ability to speak English, which was just a stupid decision. But when we get them reuniting, I thought that was a really sweet moment. But when they were in the submarine and Sun was stuck, and Jin was trying to get her out, and when it became clear that he couldn't get her out, Sun told him to go, and he said, I'm not going to leave you again. And he decided to stay put and sacrifice his life and stay with Sun. That was honestly the most emotional moment of the entire show. That was the first time in the show where it hit me in the feels. And everyone's reactions to it afterwards as well was really powerful. Like, you can just feel the amount of people who have died since the beginning of the show, and you feel the weight of that. And very powerful stuff in that episode. One character who I haven't really talked about is Frank, who I believe is played by Jeff Hurley. If I'm incorrect, I apologize. The character's written really poorly, but I like what the actor brings to him. He just brings a likable presence. The other passengers from the season 5 plane crash, I really don't like, and when it turns out they're Jacob's disciples, I thought that was really stupid. None of them were remotely interesting, but at least they bring the comedic golden scene of that girl blowing herself up. I'm such a terrible person, but I burst into laughter during that, so yes. Charles Whitmore and his crew are on this island now, and once again, this is a character who I've never liked. It's like they were building him up to be the main villain for the rest of the show, and they just backtracked on that, and then they backtracked on their backtrack, and now it's just leave him alone. And the crew, like that Elena character, is just a nothing character that contributes nothing. Just, yeah, didn't work for me. The plot on the island this season was really bad. Everything in the first few episodes with that temple, I thought was just really stupid. It completely failed for me. Even though I did like the music when we get introduced to the temple, but the actual story stuff going on, no. But what's even like the main plot of this season? Like they find a temple, and then they want to attack Charles Whitmore crew, and then some people want to blow up a plane, some people want to leave in the plane, the man in black wants to leave, but he can't, and he's trying to kill everyone, and trying to find a consistent storyline throughout this season is a bit more difficult. Like, season 1 is the introduction season. Season 2 is the introduction of the others, with the hatch and the ticking clock being a big element of it, and Ben in the last bit of that season. Then in season 3, it only heightens the other storyline. Season 4 is people come to the island, you're not sure if they're there to rescue them or not. Season 5 is the weird time traveling stuff. And season 6 is, I guess, the Man in Black and Jacob stuff. But then there's just all this other stuff going on. And it's a very messy season. Like, they're trying to blow up the plane, and it took them until the end to realize they could leave in the plane. Just, that was stupid. And then the Man in Black just is trying to sink the actual island. Like, where did this come from? What? And the stuff outside the island wasn't much better for me this season. Like, the alternate timeline stuff had lots of potential. It would have been great to see how different their lives could have been if it weren't for the plane crash. And if it meant the bomb at the end of season 5 worked, and then you've got this alternate timeline of what could have been, but it's like a different timeline, and it's just like, it gives a version of their characters a happy ending, while it doesn't actually change their own fates. That would have been a really great idea, but they didn't go there. It would have been a great exploration of how you can't undo any guilt or regret, how you just have to live with that. But no, the execution of everything here was just abysmal, and it doesn't help that you can't go along with that alternate timeline stuff, because everything before that point, I know they explained it eventually, was completely different. Shannon stays behind in Australia. Then you've got Jack, who has a son. Then you've got Sawyer, who's a cop. And by doing that, these aren't the characters we know and love. It's simply the actors playing dress up and pretending to be a completely different character while keeping the name. So there was no attachment to anything going on here. And then the desperate attempts to just connect all these people on the plane to each other and to other people on the island, no matter how little sense it makes, was just so contrived and so stupid. Like, of course, Kate runs into Claire and helps deliver her baby again. And of course, Ethan is the doctor who delivers the baby. And of course, Locke runs into Holly. And of course, Sawyer and Miles are partners. Why? I don't know. And why wouldn't Ben still be on the island? He wasn't on the plane. He was born, well, he wasn't born, but he was raised on the island. He would be a completely different person. And just the fact that all these different people interact with each other is just ridiculous. It would have been more meaningful if we all just like, this is what would happen to Jack if he didn't know Kate. What could have been. And just the logic behind it, like, Charles and Daniel Faraday's mom are together in this alternate timeline, and then we still see Daniel, but he wouldn't look the same. He would have a completely different everything. Like, he wouldn't be even remotely the same person. The only thing that would be similar is the name. So it just lacks any bit of logic. And then we've got the final episode, the end. And did it work for me? Well, I will say that I heard a long time ago that it turns out they're in purgatory, and I felt like that was very misleading, or people are just stupid. Probably the latter, because yes, it turns out they're in purgatory, but only for the season 6 alternate timeline. The way people talked about it, they made it seem like the entire show they were in purgatory. So I felt misled by that. There's some stuff that really didn't work for me, like Jack's beating up the man in black. He sees that he can bleed now, and then he grabs a rock and hits him on the head. And then when they're fighting later off the cliff, Jack's beating him up, and then Locke grabs a knife and stabs him. Like he got beaten the exact same way twice in one episode. I don't buy it. I do like the atmosphere the rain brings during that fight, but it just disappears after they're done. I do like how that cave looks with the skeletons. It kind of reminded me of the ending of New Nightmare, so I like that. That said, the cave doesn't really look all that deep. And I don't like Jack's sacrifice in the fact that he died the way he did, but I do like the fact that afterwards he, with his last few breaths, he goes out into the bamboo field and lies down, and it's just like a reverse shot of the very first shot in the show. I did like that aspect of it. And like I already mentioned, I thought the Jack and Kate stuff was strong in the finale, even though I wish the season built to it better. But the purgatory stuff did surprisingly work for me. Now, it doesn't make any consistent sense with the rest of the season, but if I view this last episode in a vacuum, it worked. You are left wondering, like, so do people just forget their memories when they die? And can people just create any afterlife they want? If they want to have a kid, they can create a kid. Like, it lacks any bit of logic, but looking at it from a story point of view, I thought it was emotionally impactful. It just allows it to sink in just how much you've come to care for these characters. You spent a lot of time with them. You've seen lots of them grow in different ways. And it just felt like a proper treatment of them in the final episode. Is it super sappy and overly dramatic? Yes. You know, everyone hugging each other in slow motion with the music, the sappy music being heightened to 110 degrees. Yes, they're trying way too hard, but the emotion is there, and you're just left, you know, I do think the message of it is kind of powerful, like, that despite all their guilt and regret and stuff that they've gone through in life, that one day they'll be reunited with the people that they love. And it's a nice thought, and it's a nice note to end the show on. So, despite all of its flaws of the final season, and despite the flaws I even have with the last episode, it still ends on a very strong note for me. But I do have more issues, of course. The recap of the season 5 finale at the beginning of this season was unneeded. The CGI in the opening scene of this season was really bad. It kind of reminded me of Escape from LA. And then it's, once again, the island is way too comedically large. They really haven't seen this fucking temple before? Give me a break. Like, they haven't seen this lighthouse before? They even address it and they're like, wow, how have we never seen this before? I guess we weren't looking. No, that doesn't work. Like, no, absolutely not. And then there's this mysterious magical light that no one has seen or it's been mentioned at all before. Like, come on, like, that stupid mysterious light thing was just stupid. Like, you can feel like it was just made up on the spot and there was no plan for this show and that they just needed something, so they're just like, what about a magic light? It didn't work for me in any way. And this is an issue with the show, but I really came to notice it this past season. But the way they talk about tracking is so contrived. Like, you can tell that no one actually knows how to track anyone, and they're just making it all up. And it's just really silly. Like, if we leave a track for you, could you find us? Absolutely. And then he's looking for them, but he's not looking on the ground for anything. Like, if they put thought into that, it could be a great storytelling device, but no. Just, it's so silly. Season 5, they're traveling through time, and now they're in present day again, and just, there's no more explanation. No one brings it up. No one's like, hey, we saw you in a picture of 1977. What was that up? No one asks them that. No one's like, guess what? We traveled back in time. Just no one. I don't buy that. I really hate the island is calling us back aspect. It's just, you watch a show like Dark and you see how well planned out that show was, and then you get this show. It's just clear that this final season wasn't planned out at all. And I'll talk more about this in the series review, but let people talk. Let longer conversations happen. I get really sick when characters reunite or they're going to talk about some difficult stuff and they get interrupted time and time again. And this season I noticed it more than ever because I wanted more closure and I never got it. The two best episodes this season are Dr. Linus. I thought that was a really good episode that actually explored the idea of Jacob and the Man in Black really well. And The Candidate might be my favorite episode of the entire show. It was fast moving, it was thrilling, it was tense, and it ended on the show's strongest emotional note yet. Fantastic episode. Overall, this season was very hit or miss. There were definitely some great moments and some great ideas, but this final season should have focused on the final four a lot more than they did. Locke should have stayed dead, and they should have just focused on Kate, Jack, Sawyer, and Holly. No more talking to the dead. No need of other survivors. Just finish their story and keep it character-centric. That's what they should have done. Instead, we try to get this exploration of religion and good versus evil, and hey, that's ambitious. I can appreciate that, and there's moments where it feels fully realized, but more often than not, it completely falls flat. The Temper storyline did nothing for me. Everything on the island just felt like it was getting made up on the spot. It just was lacking a certain sense of finality. Lots of the answers we got to questions from previous seasons weren't satisfying. And some of the treatment of the characters, I just really hated. Look, I'll give any show credit for being really ambitious and trying to go out there. But for its final season, they should have kept it smaller scale and just focused more on the characters. And I wasn't left satisfied with the season as a whole. Like I said, some great moments, some great ideas, but overall, it was very lacking. So I'm going to go ahead and give Lost Season 6 a 4.5 out of 10. Okay, so now that I'm done my review for each individual season of Lost, I will be doing a series review, and boy, I already got my notes for it. And I got a feeling that it's going to be a very long video. I'm also going to be ranking each season. I'm going to be talking about my 5 favorite characters in the show, and I'm also going to be talking about my 10 favorite episodes. So I'm still going to be talking about Lost for weeks to come, so stay tuned for that. But what did you think of Lost Season 6? Please let me know in the comments down below if you were satisfied or not. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.